But first, I will tell you, we have got news out of Texas. It's a big, big mess out there, this ransomware situation. You know, when I talk about Intech Systems here on the air, that's the kind of thing they do, is go out and advise local companies all up and down the East Coast about how they can protect their data. And when I first started talking to them, I guess it's been over a year now, the stories weren't, there were frequent stories, but they weren't in the news every single day. And I swear to you, part of my routine in the morning is I come in and I type in ransomware and I type in hackers and just see, and there's always a new story. Sometimes it's only a couple of hours old by the time we go on the air. Now, the latest one that has got everybody concerned, and I guarantee you they're talking about this at these meetings where they get county officials in at their national headquarters and stuff. 23 towns in Texas all had their computer systems hacked, and their data is being held hostage in a large-scale coordinated ransomware attack from just several days ago, August 16th. Hey, Dr. Christopher Copeland is the assistant professor and director of the Institute of Homeland Security and Cybercrime at Tarleton State University. Dr. Copeland, tell me, what exactly has happened in Texas? 23 localities hit. How bad is it?
So anytime that a city services are hit with a ransomware attack, obviously it's bad for that city. The fact that this one was coordinated to such a large scale makes it a little more difficult for the Texas Emergency Services to help those cities recuperate.
You say coordinated. Are we talking about a bunch of different hackers, or is it the same person or group?
So the information about that is not been released publicly yet. So more than likely, it's the same group. Anytime that somebody uses the word coordination, it usually comes from one source in terms of the vector of attack.
Yeah. So what they figure out, some vulnerability that they figure is also available to them over and over and over again, and they just go after it?
So usually that's exactly what happens. They find one vulnerability in a system, and then they see how many systems they can reach at one time to release this kind of ransomware. And from that, they can release it all at once and minimize the amount of effort that they have in terms of fighting it.
Do we know what exactly that vulnerability was? Is it software that all of these counties or towns would have purchased and they find a hole in it, and so you can infect one, and then because they all speak to each other, it winds up infecting all of them? Or did they go after and find a vulnerable employee in each one of these towns and send them a link that says, here's a naked picture of you, and of course the person freaks out and clicks on it. Next thing you know, you got ransomware.
So the majority of the time, ransomware is installed either via a phishing attempt, which is the secondary thing that you said there, and that's usually the most effective. The other thing is that they could have easily been scanning or probing multiple cities at the same time and then just launched the attack all at once. The actual method hasn't been released yet, but my guess is since it was so quick to hit so many cities at once, that it was probably a phishing attempt to lists or email lists that were available publicly out on the internet.
Well, we're still finding out about Texas, but, the Baltimore story went on for weeks where they couldn't process real estate transactions. They couldn't process, even parking tickets in the city. I assume that that's been resolved. How did they end that problem in Baltimore? Did they pay those guys off, or did they come up with a workaround?
So my understanding is that, and again, I'll have to go back and look, but my understanding is that they did a combination. They restored some systems from backup or just reloaded some systems, and then they did make payments on other systems once they could verify that payment was going to be an actual trigger to releasing the data.
So shoot straight with me.
I think in Baltimore it was a combination.
Yeah, is that what you kind of have to do? You hate to admit it because, we have this mindset, and I think it's the right one, we don't negotiate with terrorists, right? But, if you're going to go out of business or you have to function as a city, have we come to the point where you just have to pay the thing off?
Well, it depends on the resources that are available. I had this discussion with a city manager not too long ago. If you're a city, like in Texas, for instance, I pick on Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, and Austin because they're the biggest cities, San Antonio as well. If you're those size cities of, 500,000 or 1 million people or more, then you have the resources that you can utilize to either pay them off or reload, or a combination, very much like what Baltimore did. But if you're a smaller city, or you're a municipality of, just a few hundred people, you don't have those resources.
Yeah, what are you supposed to do?
Either to pay or to go about and purchase new hardware.
Mm-hmm.
So, it depends on the resources that are available and what's important to that municipality in terms of getting back up and operational.
Yeah, well,
if we're talking about tax stuff, then that's maybe secondary to, water supply systems.
Well, I do these commercials for this company here in Richmond, Intech Systems, and they work with companies all up and down the East Coast, trying to give them the best strategies, keep them up to date on the newest technology that's out there to try to repel these phishing attacks and the hackers. If you were advising these communities in Texas, is there anything specific that you would say, hey, this is what you should be thinking about going forward to try to increase the barriers to attack?
So increasing the barriers to attack, one, the first and foremost thing is have a plan, right? Don't assume that you're going to be invulnerable to such an attack. Assume that you're going to get hit with it sooner or later and have a plan of action for continuance of operations. The second thing is make sure, and this goes for everybody, make sure that your software updates are patched. The number one key to disabling vulnerabilities is to make sure that those vulnerabilities have been patched and updated. And that's where most people fall into. Cities, municipalities, organizations, people fall into the biggest set of prey is that they don't keep their system updates going and up to date.
Yeah, that's a pain to do, but you got to shut down long enough to get it affected. That's smart advice. Dr. Christopher Copeland from the Institute of Homeland Security and Cybercrime at Tarleton State University. Really appreciate you coming on this morning.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it a lot.